Another game with Kevin Durant and another W for the Phoenix Suns. On today's episode of Locked On Suns, we'll break down this Friday night blowout win by the Suns over the Bulls. Another all-around game, another multifaceted win. Let's dive in. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, and we are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and the host of the Just Basketball Show wherever you get podcasts. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen. Friday night, Saturday morning, whenever you are finding the show, celebrating another double-digit win by the Suns. Hit follow or subscribe wherever you're finding the show. Get this show in your feed every single Monday through Friday, and who knows, maybe some bonus episodes just like this one along the way. Lord knows it's going to be a crazy and fun rest of the season. You don't want to miss any of it, and the best way to keep up is to listen to this daily podcast. We are free, and we will never have a paywall. All you got to do is hit follow, hit subscribe, join in. You can also follow along at Locked On PHX Suns on Twitter. Get some news and analysis fun over there as well if you're on Twitter. All right, 21-point win, 125-104. We'll do the normal rundown, quick recap, bonus show today, starting with our moment of the game. It's actually going to be two, both in the second half, both the way that the Suns started quarters in the second half, the third quarter and the fourth quarter. One with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant doing their thing. The other with a bench unit, with a more reserve-heavy lineup getting the job done. We'll dive into that in a second. Today's show, guys, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. Make every moment more with FanDuel by visiting FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Okay, so third quarter. Suns actually go into halftime down 4 points. They blow the lead at the end of the second quarter, at the end of the first half, and they come out and respond. Devin Booker and Kevin Durant combined for 16 of the Suns' first 18 points in this quarter, which takes us to the 6-minute and 16-second mark. So that's the stretch we're talking about. The first 6 minutes of that third quarter, the Suns turn a 4-point deficit into a 6-point lead. So that, for anyone counting at home, is a 20-10 turnaround. What was pretty impressive to me about it was nothing was super complicated. Okay? It was all jumpers for the most part. We'll get into that later in the show, late at the end of the show with our box score oddity. I'll have a number for you to illustrate how jumper heavy this game was on both ends, on both sides. But a lot of this was so simple. You had, feed, get Kevin Durant the ball at the right elbow. The Bulls made a decision that they were going to double that, send help immediately. And sometimes it felt like 3 guys were coming toward Durant, and it's an easy kick out. And when you have Devin Booker on the opposite wing and Josh Okogie, who continues to be a miracle for this team, making 5 of his 10 threes tonight, it's simple basketball. It becomes very, very easy for everybody. And actually, the Suns extended that lead to 9 because I'm cutting it off there to keep that 16 of 18 by Booker and Durant statistic going. But really, the next made shot in the game after the stretch that I just highlighted was an Okogie 3 off of a Booker assist. So you could say, I guess, to keep the statistical fun going, you would say what? That they scored or assisted on 19 of the 21. I think that would get the job done. But yeah. You had the elbow doubling kickouts. You had Durant just getting to the basket. You had Durant rising up over the top of everybody. He had a much-needed 3 in this stretch, just rising up with the defense in his face. He had another one like that at the beginning of the fourth quarter, which can take us to that second moment of the game. So if that first moment was just the overall talent of the team, The fact that you have two killer, all-star, superstar level shot makers getting you where you needed to go in the game. I think this second moment, the start of the fourth quarter, was a little tougher, a little bit more work required, and it was important for a few reasons. So in this game, we saw Monty Williams go with a rotation where, for the most part, up until this point, the bench lineups had Devin Booker as the only starter. So in the first game against Charlotte 2 nights ago, we saw Durant be the guy to play predominantly with those bench units. Monty mixed up a lot with the rotation tonight. We'll get to that as well. But in this case, one of the big changes was to have Booker be the only starter out there with a bunch of bench players. So that would be Payne. That would be, who else was out there? Damian Lee, Torrey Craig, and Jock Landale. That was the main bench lineup, and Booker was out there for the most part. But in this beginning of the fourth quarter, it was Durant. And so Monty finally adjusts, and it comes at the perfect time because the Suns once again make a big run. So they enter the fourth quarter up 9. They extend that lead to 12 is about fair. Yeah, about 12 over the course of 3.5 minutes, okay? And Durant had 6 of the, how many points? This mouse doesn't work. 11 points. So Durant had more than half of the points in this stretch to extend the lead. He also had an assist. So again, he scored or assisted on 9 of these 11 points. And first of all, it's important because I think that's going to be the bench unit that makes the most sense going forward. Okay, I think that is going to have to be, especially when you're talking about Kevin Durant not having a minutes limit. Tonight he played 31. I'm not sure where his minutes were supposed to be, but he finishes with 31. If that gets up to 34 or so, that makes it even easier for Monty to build out a rotation where Durant is featured with those bench units, but it just works better. You know, there's a part of me that this was one of my biggest questions, and I didn't have a great answer. Who was going to be the guy? And it could be multiple, right? I don't think it's always going to have to be the case, especially come playoff time, that it's 4 bench players and just 1 starter. It might be 2 and 3, or, we'll see. But it was that question was hard to figure out because, look, there's one part of you that just says, okay, maybe it's Chris Paul because he's going to be able to get guys good shots. But the more you watch this bench, and I probably should have even known this ahead of time and not tricked myself or overthought it like I did, but it's not enough. The Suns don't have the bench scoring for even a great distributor like Paul to be able to set them up. You need a scorer out there. And what we saw with Booker was, in one way, obviously a version of that, right? He's a scorer, but he was not really playing off of his teammates super well and going ISO a little bit. Honestly, more than he even normally does. That's not me criticizing that in general those lineups don't work. We've seen a lot of times over the past few seasons, Booker at the end of a first quarter, because he almost always plays the whole first with bench guys, and that lineup tends to do well. In this case, it just didn't, and he wasn't really maximizing them. So I don't want to judge him too harshly off of that one moment. We've seen it work in the past, but there's just a different level that you saw with Durant, and I think the chemistry with Jock Landale is honestly one of the biggest parts of this. Landale assisted a KD3 in this stretch. You had a Landale block. Talk about him more in a second, but when it comes to the rotation, but those two guys just had a nice 2-man game going, good chemistry, dribble handoffs, slipping screen to get the amount of defensive attention the Bulls were sending at Durant was stifling, and he was more than comfortable slipping that drop pass to Landale on the roll to make a play. Sometimes Durant got it back. Sometimes Landale went right up for the shot. Sometimes the ball kicked out to a shooter. Either way, that was really working. You could see that trust and chemistry developing pretty quickly. And most importantly, the reason it's a moment of the game is the Suns didn't let the lead get out of their hands. I mean, honestly, Booker had an amazing plus 23 in this game. So, again, very silly to criticize it too harshly, but those minutes where it was just him and the bench, you could have imagined the going into this fourth quarter, DeRozan was on the court, and if Booker had been out there with the bench and the Bulls were able to make a run, suddenly, a 9-point game can get pretty interesting and tight pretty quickly. Instead, when Durant, checked out and sat in the middle of the fourth quarter, which he's been doing, the Suns were comfortable with a double-digit lead by that point, and then it was, basically white flag territory pretty soon after, and the Suns end up with a 20-plus point win. So they got the lead back at the beginning of the third. They extended the lead at the beginning of the fourth. Both times Kevin Durant was prominently featured, but each way of getting there was pretty different, and so we learned a lot from this game, I think, for sure. We're going to get to the big takeaway, which overall is that despite some of those positives I just listed, this was an example of why things will be a little bit experimental during this stretch. We'll dive into why next. First, though, today's show, guys, is brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network and America's #1 sportsbook. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 at FanDuel right now. That's bonus bets back in your pocket if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app now. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use, and you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to threes drained. I was actually pulling something up to share with you guys to get you a good award for this one, and Defensive Player of the Year is pretty interesting right now because Jaren Jackson Jr. has been the heavy favorite all season long. Brooke Lopez is a good second. Nick Claxton has fallen off because the Nets aren't in the spotlight anymore, but Bam Adebayo has a genuine claim to that throne, and he is sitting at plus 850. So there's game lines, there's everything else. There's also awards bets, and of course, everything across sports, not just in basketball, but that's what I'm going to geek out on, put some money down on. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets at a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay, so don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. Okay, so that was our moments of the game. Let's get to our takeaway of the game, which in this case, as I was just saying, is that this is an experiment. All right. First and foremost, this is not going to be smooth. This is not going to be replicable. We're not going to see the same exact thing night to night to night. All right. I guess really to me, the only constant in this game was that Booker had 30-plus points, honestly, and 6 assists and no turnovers. Again, I do not want that last segment to come off like I was criticizing Booker. It's just those particular lineups with the bench I think are going to be better with Durant. But Booker was the only constant, getting shots off, having space to rise up and fire. 6 threes in this game, the curse of the 6 threes in the regular season. Returned today, which is kind of hilarious in its own. But other than that, not much felt the same as Wednesday. Right? In this game, a few things jump out on that note. So Josh Okogie was probably the story of the game outside of Booker. 5 of 10 from 3. Much more effective night from him offensively than in that Wednesday game. And he took advantage of the attention that was being paid to the stars, especially Durant. Flip side of that, you have Deandre Ayton taking only 4 shots in this game. There was a moment in the fourth quarter he gets the ball on the roll about the free throw line and takes sort of a leaning jumper off the catch immediately. Green light, fire, and I think Kevin Ray said he hasn't shot the ball in a long while, and you kind of get why he did it. But then you look up at the box score and it's like, man, only 4 shot attempts. That's a whole other level. And so that's one. And then the other is Chris Paul. He had 8 shot attempts when it was all said and done, but I think if I have it right from memory, he did not shoot the ball in the first half of the game. And then he has the 10 assists and just 2 turnovers. He was 1 of 8, I believe, in the first game. So in that, I guess, regard, that's another similarity. He did make more of his shots tonight, so he got into double figures scoring, but things are going to be different night to night. I think that the benefit is, if there's anything we've seen, Durant and Booker getting into their spots, getting to their spots, finding space, and scoring is not going to be in doubt. You know, those guys have both, Durant's been 20 plus both of these games, Booker's been 30 plus. They've been able to get theirs without it coming at the detriment of one another, really without having to take a ton of shots overall. I mean, Durant only took 10 field goal attempts to get his 20. That's about as efficient as it's going to get. Book shot 50%. So that's good. And I'm not even saying the other stuff is necessarily negative, but, you know, 7 and 3, that's not the type of stats, that's not the type of involvement you want from your star center, right? So I think that's just something to keep an eye on. How do they keep it all going? And, you know, I would expect Durant and Booker are probably going to be the only constants in a lot of ways, but you can't go too many games without guys feeling involved and rewarded and getting to produce, I think. The other way things are going to be different is the rotation, and I'm going to do a bench mob vibe check here in just a second, but from a big picture standpoint, I think there was a big positive tonight, which was Jock Landale, all right? And that's something I actually could see building, and so I guess there's two sides of it, right? I'm sitting here telling you things aren't going to be the same, but at the same time, there's going to be trends that materialize, patterns that materialize, chemistry that develops. And I think, as I was saying in that last segment, Durant and Landale can do that. And I think you're already seeing it. And it's not just on offense. You saw Landale have 2 blocks tonight. That does not include, by the way, the 2 missed dunks as well as a missed layup by Andre Drummond. Just missed them, not even blocked, not really defended. And yet they did not go in. But Landale was a plus 10 tonight. Best plus minus on the bench. And a lot of that came with some of the minutes where he was out there with the starters. He played 21 minutes tonight, okay? And Ayton only played 27. That was a lot of rewarding Jock for how well he played. And so that was a difference from Wednesday. Not that Landale didn't play well the last time, but he played even better tonight. And beyond that, the way he was able to develop chemistry with Durant. And so I would not be surprised if, to wrap this all up, as much as it's going to be an experiment, as much as there were very big differences between Wednesday and tonight, that will be one of the consistencies. I think you'll see Landale continue to get opportunities. Monty chose to go with him as the backup center, focus in on that rather than pinging between Landale and Biyombo as he had been doing all season. Landale is rewarding that, and he's developing chemistry with the best player on the team pretty quickly in a lineup, as I just illustrated, that is going to be pretty important for this team in the long run. So that all adds up to some nice positives coming off of this, even though it was a little crazy. All right. Bench mob vibe check, box score oddity, maybe some quick thoughts on the Mavs game before we get out of here. First, one more quick break. All right, let's get out of here with our usual recap show segments. Number 1, bench mob vibe check. We talked about Landale just a minute ago. Let's get to the rest of these guys. Differences tonight. One was predictable. Ish Wainwright basically not in the rotation. That, as much as it was a positive and cool story to see him get rewarded with the NBA contract, or even earlier in the season than he did last year, to get the multi-year potential to make some money guaranteed next year, it was predictable that he would see his minutes fall. He just doesn't provide as much as other guys do, all right? He can't really put the ball on the ground that well. Yes, he can make open shots, but that's about it offensively. And then defensively, really just a stay in front of your man type of guy, not a huge difference maker. So that was predictable. There's also just a lot of forwards on this team and not a ton of minutes to go around. But what was less predictable is the fact that on the same night that happened and Terrence Ross was inactive again, Darius Bazley got 7 minutes. Okay, so I would say up and down, but mostly, I don't want to say mostly down, but 3 fouls is really what jumps out to me there. I don't remember all 3, so I don't want to hold him to that, but he just looked like a guy who hasn't gotten consistent playing time this season, is still very raw, and got plopped into the middle of a game the Suns were trying to win, I don't want to read too much back and forth on his performance, but the surprise was just that he played at all. I don't think that's going to be going forward the case, but I also can see from Monty's standpoint a little bit, like, we can't not play him at all. You know, it wouldn't be fair to him to get traded and then not get a single opportunity. And so it was, I guess, a little strange to see it happen in a competitive game on the road, but whatever. Monty has done this a million times in terms of, you know, reading young players of what do I know? He's been around it much more than me. I wouldn't expect Bazley to play on Sunday, for instance, but he got out there tonight. He didn't make a ton of huge mistakes. He didn't make a ton of big plays. He just was out there, but surprising nevertheless. Bigger picture even than that, though, on the bench mob vibe check real quick is Monty seems to not, he's not going to do the let's settle on a rotation thing. And maybe that's because Terrence Ross has been out and it's not worth trying to build out a whole specific 10-man exact to the minute type of rotation with Ross out because he's going to be a key part of it. But either way, Monty, you know, came out right away when the Durant deal happened saying, you know, we got to find our 9.5 guys. We got to do, you know, this trimming process of who are really going to be our core lineups and our core pieces of the rotation. He stuck to that for 3 or 4 games. It's already gone. And it's fine as long as they keep winning and they keep learning things about who fits with who and all that. It's not like it's that huge of a problem. Teams have won championships without a firmed up, clear-cut rotation. The playoffs have a way of blowing up your best laid plans with your rotation anyway. But I do think you got to at least know who the 10-ish guys are that you're going to want out there, and it doesn't even feel like the Suns know that. TJ Warren did not play. You know, he played Wednesday, then he didn't play today. Basically, Bazley got his minutes tonight. So we don't seem any closer to figuring that out. Box score oddity, just to wrap us up here, interesting tidbit that you might not have noticed statistically tonight is the points in the paint. So let's return all the way back to my first moment of the game when I was talking about those jumpers that Durant and Booker hit. That was a trend all night long. 22, just 22 of the Suns' points tonight came in the paint. 22 out of 125. For the Bulls, it was 26 out of 104, and that is what happens when you have two of the most mid-range and jumper-heavy teams in terms of their star scorers going up against one another. DeRozan and Levine are jumper-happy players. DeRozan more so than anybody, and Durant and Booker the same. Paul even the same. And then you couple that with Okogie getting hot from deep and Ayton barely getting involved offensively, and there you have it. That adds up very obviously and quickly to just 22 points in the paint. Just a crazy number, especially, I don't know, I guess I was going to say especially in the NBA today, but, there was probably more paint shots taken back in the day. It's just with how much drive and kick there usually is in an NBA game these days, you got to have, you would expect a pretty high number of those drives to result in some scoring. They did not do that. All right, quick thoughts on the Mavs game before we wrap up. It's going to be the biggest test of the Suns season, or it's going to be the biggest test in terms of importance of the X's and O's, the film. It's going to be the game that teaches us the most about this team, I guess is the best way to put it, right? Because this is exactly, I did a show before we ever even saw Kevin Durant in a Suns uniform telling you Dallas was still a matchup I was worried about. They have scored like they are, the dream team since they traded for Kyrie Irving. Now, they're only 2-4 from a record standpoint with him and Luka both in the lineup, but they can score. And so what do you do to defend that, right? Josh Okogie has been starting the past 2 games, and Monty did tell us that was going to be matchup based. Tonight he guarded Levine and Booker guarded DeRozan most of the time, although they switched and matched up with different guys a lot. So we haven't seen a game where quote-unquote matchups have had to affect the decisions. I could see Craig starting on Sunday. Let me put it this way. If Monty is telling the truth that he will change the starting lineup based on matchups, I could see Sunday being a time to do it, mostly because of Luka. Now, at the same time, you also have to realize Kyrie is a guy who you would want a Kogi out there to guard. And so there's not a great answer, really. I think considering that Luka has the ball more, what I would imagine is going to be the case is we could see Craig be matched up on Luka, and then Booker be the technically lined up to guard Kyrie, and then they just switch a ton. They're going to switch a ton either way, and so maybe Okogie does just starts on Kyrie, maybe Booker starts on Luka. That's the other way to do it, and then you're back to, okay, they're switching a lot. But I would be interested to see Craig, because I, again, think this is the type of game. This and the Clippers are the two matchups where I think you're going to want more size. You're going to want a wing defender, a traditional forward/wing defender out there rather than a smaller guard defender like Okogie. But we'll see. No matter what, the Suns don't have an amazing answer for it. Matchup, straight up matchup type of thing. They don't have, okay, you guard him with the Mavs. It's going to have to be team defense. It is going to have to be rotations and contesting. And it's going to have to be, make those guys do what the Bulls just did, which is take a bunch of jumpers. But I'm very excited. Plan is to go live after that game with Brandon Duenas. For our usual Sunday show, we'll just have it be live, recapping the Mavs game right here with you. So hit follow or subscribe. Get that show. Get every show going forward in your feed every Monday through Friday, plus some bonus ones just like this. Thank you for making Locked On Suns your first listen today, though. In the meantime, go make Locked On NBA your second listen. Get caught up. Wrap up the week across the association with that show. They're available on all podcast platforms as well. I'll talk to you all on Monday.